I'm going to come strong right out of the gate here and say that not vaccinating your children because of some infographic you saw on Facebook is not only incredibly stupid, but also wildly dangerous. If you or your child can't get certain vaccines due to an allergy or an illness, then that's a whole other ballgame, and I'm not talking about those people. I'm talking about the people who willfully believe misinformation on sites like Facebook, of all places, instead of taking the time to open Google and to type in, at the very least, CDC vaccine facts. The first result is literally a page from the CDC, Center for Disease Control, that lists facts about vaccines for parents due to the massive amounts of misinformation that gets spread, and also because that's just what the CDC does on their website. They post factual information on diseases and vaccines and a lot of medical conditions that are backed by actual doctors and scientists who've done the research and who are educated. If you want to know what not vaccinating your children does, look at the measles outbreak that's been happening in our country for the past 4 months or so. So the end of 2018, beginning of 2019. When you don't vaccinate your children for entirely preventable diseases like measles, when there's an outbreak of it, your child will get it. And look, measles is deadly. It can kill your kid, and ultimately, I don't think a parent's misinformed beliefs on vaccinations is worth more than the life of their child. That's just me though, and any parents that want to argue, sound off in the comments below. There's also that dumb rumor about how vaccines cause autism. They don't. Diagnoses of autism spectrum disorder started rising in the early 90s, so a common argument was made that a chemical found in those vaccines was the cause for the rising diagnosis of ASD. They phased that chemical out of vaccines in the early 2000s, yet the rate of diagnosis of ASD kept rising despite that, and in the article that I'm sourcing this from, they point out that people assumed that correlation meant causation. I dropped out of high school during my junior year, and I've retained very, very little knowledge from the science and math classes that I've taken, but correlation does not mean causation. I'd say that the increasing amount of cases of things like the measles is caused by all of the misinformation that people spread about vaccines. That misinformation is the causation for these outbreaks that are entirely preventable. I'd also argue that the diagnosis rate of ASD started rising due to activists educating people on exactly what autism is, a neurological disorder that develops before you're even born in the first place, thus meaning higher diagnosis rates. For example, things like depression. That has a higher diagnosis rate because people are more informed on what depression is, and there's a broader definition of it. Same with autism spectrum disorder. And when people are more educated on the symptoms of these disorders and illnesses, then they're able to go to their doctors with information, and they're able to be more easily diagnosed instead of living with this thing and not knowing what it is. If you look into anti-vaxxer arguments deeper than the surface level, dip your fingertip into the cup of water that are those arguments, you'll see that there's more holes in them than a slice of Swiss cheese. Every single anti-vaxxer argument that I've seen either has no scientific backing at all or comes from unverified and unaccredited sources. And on a more anecdotal level, I got all of my vaccines when I was born, and on the few occasions that there were outbreaks of measles and chickenpox in the schools that I've gone to, guess what? I didn't catch anything. I could have easily contracted those viruses were I to have not been vaccinated, because I assure you I was more than exposed. But I was vaccinated, so I didn't catch anything. I do skip out on flu vaccines because every year there's a different strain, and I'm also young and have a good immune system, so for me, right now, it's not a worry. Because I know that if I get sick, I can easily fight it off or just go get a vaccine anyways. But for very, very young children and for elders, getting a flu vaccine is important as well. Because the flu vaccine protects against numerous strains of the flu, not just one, and I think that if you have a weakened immune system, due to your age or due to any illnesses that you may have, then it's worth it to get that vaccine, because the flu can easily be deadly if it hits you at the wrong time. Anyways, the point of this rant is to tell you, please, vaccinate your children, and if you are an adult and you haven't had any vaccines, go get them! Save up some coin, and go to a doctor and get some vaccines. I've included relevant links in the description of this video that I use as sources, so feel free to skim through those yourself, because it's not hard, and skimming an article for a few minutes could quite literally be the difference between life and death for someone. And with that, this has been Hot Takes, and I am out.